Hello and welcome everybody to yet another episode of our exploring locations all across Europe with of course your host which is myself, Dr. Lillian Cespedes Gonzalez, historian, tour guide and travel planner for everybody that enjoys history, culture and off the beaten path locations. So today it's a very special session for me because I'm taking you to my home country of Spain and most importantly to the north, to the beautiful green north of Spain that most people forget exists, but that is full of history, full of culture, full of great food, and very lovely people. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Before I actually get to our agenda, please let me remind you that all of our tours and talks here in our YouTube channel are done free of access with the generosity of donations, tips, and support by our members on PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. You have the links in there right on the description on the tour. But in any case, it is paypal.me/Travolution Tours and buy me a coffee/Travolution. So keep up the good work. Thank you so much for your patronage and let's get rolling. Well, so here it's me in one of my favorite places in the world, Picos de Europa, and we were going to talk about that a bit more in a few moments. But this is what we're going to be looking at today. I will give you a general background to the area, which I think is important because, well, a lot of people don't necessarily know where a lot of these regions are in Spain, since they are a bit smaller than perhaps better well-known locations like maybe Madrid or Barcelona. And then we're gonna go region by region. So I have five main regions that we're gonna be dealing with today, which are the historic Celtic French regions of Navarra, País Vasco, Cantabria, Asturias, and Galicia. And well, I hope that you enjoy them and that you're ready for the ride. First things first, this is just a very quick map of the locations that we're literally talking about. It's everything that relates to the sort of red box up here. And we call them the Celtic Fringe because these were the areas where we have had a lot of Celtic settlements during the early history of Spain and where that kind of culture has still prevailed. We still have a lot of historical relations in the area to the Celtic background, whether it is because of the way of life, the landscape, mythology, culture, food, historical sites, etc. That is where we're going to be locating our exploring session today. And this is just so you can see and so you can understand why this part of Spain is a bit different, the general background. This is a very green area of Spain. It's very mountainous. And the reason for that is because we have El Mar Cantábrico, the Cantabrian Sea, right on the coast, which is the area that many people know as the Gulf of Biscay, but actually it's the Cantabrian Sea itself. And in very, very close proximity, we have some pretty high mountains, which are the spin-off of the Pyrenees and all the way up through the Cordillera Cantábrica and the Macizo Galaico. So as you can see, it's high altitude, high humidity, it's bound to rain. And not just that, it's bound to produce some beautiful landscapes, which I really hope you will get to enjoy in this session. So the other thing to consider is the weather, of course. This is the precipitation levels that we encounter all across these areas, and you can contrast them very quickly with the area of Castile. So as you see, even though some areas like Burgos aren't far away from Santander or Pamplona, as you can tell, the precipitation levels go really down. And well, this is also a general idea of the climatological conditions in terms of the temperature. The majority of the area that we're dealing with is what we call a continental oceanic climate, so it's essentially humid and chilly, or mountainous. So as a result, this is not the sunny Spain that people think about. It's still sunshine in the summer and in the spring, and we still get some very lovely days, but the climate is very different, and as a result, history and the people are different too. Well, let's get started with the community of Nafarroa, la Comunidad Foral de Navarra, or Navarra overall. This is an area that a lot of people don't necessarily know very much. The name is Nafarroa in Euskera because this is one of the parts of Spain where we speak this language, which most people associate with the Basque Country, but actually the Basque community of Spain and the south of France is a lot larger than just the Basque Country as people see it. Well, Navarra was actually very important during the Middle Ages and all the way up to the beginning of what we call the Golden Age of Spain. It is an important area because it has frontier with France, and as a result, it has a long tradition of history and culture, but that is often forgotten. The capital of Navarra is Pamplona Iruña. I always give the names in Spanish and in Euskera just so people can get a bit more familiar with this. And it's very famous for what you see represented in here, which is the bull rides of San Fermin. I think it's a shame that a beautiful town like Navarra with or a beautiful town like Pamplona with a beautiful region like Navarra are just remembered for San Fermin, which is not necessarily the top highlight of Spanish culture, and that unfortunately everybody seems to always associate us with. So let me give you other reasons why go to Navarra and Pamplona, and the first one being this one. This is the Ciudadela of Pamplona. This is part of the fortress of the city. It's a Renaissance fortification built in the 16th century to the 17th century, and it's in a wonderful state of conservation. It's actually considered a national monument, and it has won awards in terms of heritage conservation and a reutilization, because nowadays the majority of the fortress is used as a green space for people in Pamplona to enjoy. Now, the history of the fortress has been pretty much important up until the moment in time where Spain and France stopped being at war, which is roughly the 19th century. And even then, this will be picked up again during the time of the Spanish Civil War. Unfortunately, the history of Spain is not always sunshine and rainbows, as I'm sure many of you know. And we know that actually during the time of the Spanish Civil War, the location that you're seeing here was used as one of the many concentration camps that were actually located all across Spain. So, despite its dark background, there are actually monuments, memorials, etc., all across this green region to, acknowledge all of these issues of the past and educate people in a space that otherwise is entirely free of charge and that you can enjoy at any moment. And I very much recommend that you do. It's a lovely space within the city. Well, if you're in Navarra, in the community itself, and you want to get away from Pamplona, you definitely must to go to Monasterio de Leire. This is one of the earliest and greatest examples of great conservation in Spain. It is near the border with the region of Aragon, and it's very famous because it's a beautiful example of Spanish Romanesque, which generally has very, very few comparisons, not just in the whole country, but all across Europe. So Leire is definitely one of those must-go places. If you can, though, mind you, it's not necessarily terribly accessible because I'm sure, as you can see, it's right in the middle of the mountains. But if you can make your way up there and actually for a whole journey across all of these regions, not just Pamplona, but the north of Spain. If you can, I very much recommend that you grab a car or that you use car services. Public transport in the north of Spain can be a bit tricky because the geography, of course, and trains are not terribly popular unless you're in certain big cities. But let's say cross-country or cross-regional trains don't really work very well, and bus services may prove challenging across, very narrow roads. But do not let that discourage you and just be brave. Another location that you of course must visit if you are in Navarra is El Palacio Real de Olite. Olite is definitely one of my earliest memories as a young person interested in history. I was actually here with a school trip, and then eventually I went there on a journey that we did in the area of Navarra on my first year of university, since I went there to do some conservation and archaeology work on the site of El Castillo de Irulegui, which has actually become a very famous site nowadays because we found a very early artifact from what we think are the early natives of Iberia, which is the hand of Irulegui, in case that you're interested. But I digress. It is honestly like such a fairy tale kind of place. It's one of the best examples of civil Gothic from the 15th century that we have in the country and the vast majority of Europe. And it is actually considered the first medieval wonder of Spain. Within the amazing heritage that we have, is really, really impressive. It has a certain amount of conservation, of course, but this will take you on a spin for the background and discovery of the different royal dynasties of Spain, which people don't necessarily associate with Spain anymore, such as bloodlines that have now been, forgotten due to the way that our political system has developed. But the Kingdom of Navarra was incredibly powerful, particularly in the 11th and 12th centuries, and they ought to be remembered. Well, Another place that is super important is Roncesvalles. Now, Roncesvalles is the place where we gather there was a huge battle between the Spanish forces and the forces of Charlemagne in the early Middle Ages. What you're seeing here is actually the Sancti Spiritus Chapel, which is a UNESCO heritage site, supposedly holding the burial of the forces of Charlemagne that died in this battle. It is very important because it's also a starting point for El Camino de Santiago, for the Path of St. James that goes across the north of Spain. And again, it's a location that is quite bucolic because it's one of these tiny villages in the middle of the mountains that even if you just walk around, you will just see a very different side of Spain that perhaps not many people engage with. The rural communities of my country are often forgotten about, and it's definitely worth the while for many reasons. And well, let's talk about the countryside more specifically in terms of nature. This is part of the Bárdenas Reales, which is a geographic natural space that is very peculiar. It extends itself from the region of Navarra into Aragon, and it's a protected natural semi-desert. It comprises about 41,000 hectares, and it is all an area that has been, of course, designed by hydrographic impact. Maybe some of the water sources that created this thousands of years ago don't exist anymore, but the landscape is, of course, very striking and not necessarily the type of landscapes that we always associate with Spain or even the north. So here you are. Navarra gives you a bit of everything and definitely a land of contrast. I hope that that has enticed you to visit the region. Now we're going to move over to the border, to their Basque neighbors, to talk about El País Vasco or Euskadi. Now, Euskadi is an area I know very well because having grown in Santander, I've spent a lot of time in the Basque Country back and forth. And again, I feel that it's a place that people kind of know, but they don't necessarily understand. And it's important that you do understand. On this front, I would say that the easiest way for you to get into this part of Spain if you're flying in is probably through Bilbao and through either the cruise ship port in Bilbao, simply because it has a larger amount of people coming in, and the airport. It is one of the largest airports in Spain, so this is going to be the easiest way for you to fly in, not just from Europe, but particularly if you're coming from the United States, you probably will have to do a link in through Madrid and or Bilbao. Well, besides that, the Basque Country has an insane amount of things to offer, and it often just gets reduced to what you see on the screen, which is, of course, the largest city, which is Bilbao or Bilbo in Euskera, once again. Now, I need to emphasize a bit more the Euskera part in here because you see, the Basque Country is a historical nationality and region, meaning that Euskadi and Euskera existed way before Spain was even a country. The actual genetic composition of what makes Basque people Basque is completely different to the vast majority of Spanish people. We are actually very shocked and surprised as to where Basque or Euskera language came from. We don't really have many similar languages to it in the rest of Europe, so it's very much an isolated occurrence in an otherwise very diverse, but not quite so diverse to that extreme country like Spain. So you must understand that the identity and the things that make places like Euskadi special are very important to its people. And Basque people have normally a very strong, I guess, sense of their own identity. They like people appreciating that Euskera is something that they speak generally. And although, of course, everybody speaks Spanish, they will take it, very, very kindly if you would say things like agur or eskerrik asko, which literally means thank you. Agur is pretty much a way of saying, goodbye. So engage with the local culture, not from the point of view of Spain, but from the point of view of a region that actually is very much its own thing. Well, when in Bilbao, and definitely a place that you should visit, I think a lot of people come here probably because of the Guggenheim Museum, which is what you see here in the background. This is one of the most famous constructions done by the architect Frank Gehry. But it's not the only thing that is in the area. To be fair and frank and honest, Bilbao overall is a relatively modern city. There isn't a lot that actually is left from the earlier origins of the town. The majority of the background of this city is industrial, but the area around the Guggenheim and the Rio Nervión, the river itself, is actually quite pleasant. Just be advised that it is a very modern town. And actually, just to confirm, Bilbao is not the capital of the Basque Country. It's just the largest city. In fact, the de facto capital is Vitoria-Gasteiz, although we only say this because the political power is there. The reality is that three different regions of the Basque Country pretty much share ownership of the power of the region in a very peculiar way. Well, I think that is quite cool. And another Frank Gehry construction is actually the area of Marqués de Riscal in Álava. Álava is another one of the regions in the Basque Country, is where Vitoria-Gasteiz actually is. And a lot of people have started to come here because of enotourism, which, in case you don't know what that is, let me explain. Enotourism is a kind of tourism that you do when you visit vineyards or wine-related activities. This is actually a very flashy, very cool place. And it's another way of engaging with the beautiful Basque countryside, and perhaps the Basque countryside not many people expect. The area of Álava is where a lot of Rioja wine actually comes from, besides the area of La Rioja itself, and that is because Álava and La Rioja are literally neighbors. So everything that flows through that area is often cultivated in the Basque Country. And it's not just home to La Rioja, by the way. The area of the Basque Country is also home to a lot of Chacoli wine, which is a specific type of white wine that they produce in the area. Well, this is, like I said, very close to the area of Vitoria, which is very good for something that everybody should do when they come to the Basque Country, not just in Vitoria, but all across, which is going out for pinchos. Pinchos are one of the most wonderful things that you can eat in Spain. They are not just local to the Basque Country, but in the Basque Country there is a very big tradition of having pinchos, which some people think are like tapas. Well, let me break this to you. The reality is that a pincho and a tapa, to the vast majority of Spanish people, is roughly the same. In the English language, these two things have been completely taken out of context. But anyway, pinchos are normally presented as you see here. They are like a little tapa in a slice of bread, often. And they're supposed to be either traditional flavors or new innovative things. In fact, in case you don't know, Euskadi, or the Basque Country, is one of the areas of Spain with one of the largest amounts of Michelin stars, and they've won many, 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 many awards. And food in the Basque Country is prime. So, you must try some of the local food wherever you are. I suggest Vitoria specifically because they have a fair in the summer months, if I remember correctly, although there may be more than once by this stage, where literally almost every other bar in town will have like their own local pincho, and it goes like into a big, thing and celebration. But you can do the same in San Sebastian or in Bilbao, and it will not be a problem. Well, another place that I would like to bring your attention to is the Bosque de Omnia, which is actually the forest of Omnia, which is an active art installation that was created in the 80s by Agustín Ibernela, if I remember correctly, Urdabay. And the whole forest itself is a national reserve, and it's what we call an animated forest. So the artist created shapes from different angles so that when you move through the forest, you start seeing different things. The paint does not damage the trees, by the way. This is an entirely environmentally friendly, item, and it was very much designed in this way to bring people to nature and help them engage with it, besides the way that we've normally done. Nature has been taken for granted, I feel, by a lot of people, and well, it's a way of getting out us there and getting us to think. So do make sure that you engage with the Bosque de Omnia. And of course, go to San Sebastian. But maybe, maybe not just the area of San Sebastian, although San Sebastian is very important. Go to a lot of the, areas in the coast of the Basque Country. San Sebastian perhaps is a bit more famous because it has all its lovely beaches. It's close to France, and well, La Playa de la Concha is considered to be one of the nicest beaches and coastal walks in Spain. But it's just a lovely town for like surfing and water sports, so definitely recommended. And well, there is something else that perhaps will take you out of the box a little bit, which is this. If you can go and engage in rural traditional sports in the Basque region, this is aizkolori, which is essentially wood cutting. Um, there is a big rural tradition in the north of Spain, in the Basque Country particularly, of what we call rural sports. These are things that are still practiced and are a very important part of the culture of a lot of the regions in the north of Spain. It's a way of very much enhancing the profile of these regions where a lot of people still live traditional ways of life, and where sport is also practical because, when you're out in the woodland, you need to cut wood. And don't you think that cutting wood is a walk in the park? You actually need to be pretty fit and know what you're doing with it. So we have a lot of activities like this in the area that you can, enjoy. So go to those villages and see what the locals do. It's actually quite fun. Now, of course, I'm going to be particularly biased at this moment of the actual talk because this is Cantabria. I'm a very proud Cantabrian person and I'm here to sell my region. So, let me tell you why you should come to Cantabria. It's not just because of the beautiful shot that you have here that I took many years ago of Faro del Caballo, which is in the area of Santoña, in front of Mount Buciero, which is a beautiful regional space for mountaineering and coastal walking. But Cantabria is one of those gems in Spain that are so underrated. A lot of national tourism has started happening in my home region nowadays because people from the south and the center of Spain get really, really warm in the summer months due to the awful heat waves that we are, having. And in the north of Spain, we still have nice summers, but, we don't get to 40 or 50 degrees. So they've become a bit of, little secret escapades. But come to Cantabria the rest of the year round. We actually have a pretty stable climate. It never really gets much colder than about 13 degrees in the winter, unless it's like a very horrible winter everywhere. And in the spring, you can happily be at 18 degrees rolling around to 20 degrees. It's perfect hoodie and jeans weather. This is literally how I grew up. So, very much engaged in our culture. Well, Cantabria is well known for its beautiful landscapes, not just for its beautiful dramatic seascapes like what you see in here, but of course for one of the most renowned national parks in Spain, which is El Parco Nacional de los Picos de Europa. This is the area where I took the photo at the beginning of the tour. This is a very important location for skiing, for mountaineering again, and the highest point in Picos de Europa is 2,650 meters above the sea level. There is actually a short video clip in our channel in Travolution Tours in the short section where you can see some of the views as well from there, which is actually very nice. Well, there is actually a cable cart which will take you to the sort of landing point in Picos de Europa in case you don't want to do mountaineering but you still want to get that experience. But in order to do that, you need to go to the area of Potes and Santo Toribio de Liébana, which is what I have right here. Potes is a beautiful historic town where we have El Beato de Liébana, which is a very important piece of medieval literature, which is actually held in La Torre del Infantado, where I actually took this lovely picture from, local important museum that you should visit. And the area of Potes is very important because it's home as well to Santo Toribio, which is a UNESCO heritage site and one of the 5 places in the whole Roman Catholic Church that provides with perpetual indulgences. And more importantly, where we also contain a part of the Lignum Cross. So, as you see, somewhere in the middle of the mountains in the north of Spain, you can get beautiful sites, a lovely, mostly medieval and 15th to 16th century town, still frozen in time, with some of the best traditional food that you can eat in Cantabria, because any of the restaurants in here will charge you at a very reasonable price what we call a menú del día. So a menú del día is something very common all across Spain. It's essentially like a daily menu that is normally set at a fixed price, 15 to 20 euros max, where you get normally a starter, a main, and dessert, and water and bread. Sometimes the water and the bread are not included in the total price, but it's a very common way for the locals to eat. And I promise you that in here, eating something like a cocido, lebaniego, which is a type of local stew with legumes and meat, it's the best thing that you can do, particularly if you come down from the mountains. So, as you see, we have religious history, we have a bit of everything. Well, we're gonna come down the mountains closer to the coastal area to remind you of one of the greatest things that you must see when you're in Cantabria, which is one of our many Paleolithic caves that are declared UNESCO heritage. We have at least 10 in Cantabria. In fact, I think we're going up to 13 now of these caves, and the most famous of them all is, of course, La Cueva de Altamira Cave, which was one of the most important discoveries in this case in Europe. There is only another one like it, which is Lascaux in the south of France, and it's wonderful. In order to access the area of Altamira, though, you have to go closer to the town of Comillas. And when you are in Altamira, you have two options. You can go to the Neo Cave, which is like a reproduction of the cave plus an introduction to Paleolithic art, a museum, etc. Or if you want to visit the cave itself, which because of conservation purposes has quite a low attendance rate, you need to book very much in advance. If you want to do that, make sure that you book at least 4 to 6 months in advance, just to not be disappointed, because the affordum is very, very tightly limited. But the Neo Cave does, I would say, generally okay enough job at getting you immersed into this type of heritage. But like I said, Altamira is just the most famous. We have another 10 that you should go and visit. And actually, not just Paleolithic caves. In Cantabria, we have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of caves. So if you're into speleology, if you're into geology, and you want to see stalactites, stalagmites, etc., we have one for absolutely everybody. So go visit our caves. They're awesome. Well, as you can see, I'm a great ambassador for my region, and if you go actually to Altamira and you stop in Comillas, you also should go and visit an item created by Gaudí, which is one of the very few Gaudís that you can see outside of Barcelona and Catalunya. The image that has just popped in the screen is, of course, El Capricho de Gaudí, which is this little sort of residential house that the artist did here on a special commission at the beginning of the 19th century. And not far away from Comillas, Gaudí, and everything else that's magical about Cantabria, we have the town of Santillana del Mar, the town of the three lies, as we call it in the region, because Santillana del Mar kind of translates of Saint Flatness of the Sea. It is not saint, it's not flat, and it's not by the sea. So anyways, it is actually considered one of the most beautiful villages in Spain, and I don't say this because I'm obviously a fan. I say this because I'm sure many of you are familiar. In places like Spain, France, and Italy, there are actually heritage and rural tourism boards that do this curation list of towns depending of their historicity, cultural background, and conservation. Santillana del Mar is one of those places, and in fact in the summer there are starting to be many buses that bring people to the town. You will find beautiful traditional Cantabrian casonas, as we call them, which are essentially big houses made out of stone that used to belong to old nobles or certain families. And it's just a very, very unique looking town, which is great to find artisanal products, crafts, etc. And it does have a collegiate church, which is actually very nice and definitely worth the while if you're into that sort of thing. But do not forget about my hometown of Santander. Santander is a beautiful town, really. It's not necessarily the oldest looking town because we had a very nasty fire in the 40s, but there are a couple of tours on our channel already of Santander. You're very welcome to check them out. I'm actually going there soon after Christmas, and I'm hoping to do some more tours for you, so I hope that you can join us in some of these. But Santander is known for having one of the most beautiful beaches in the beaches and bays in the whole world. And again, this is not me saying it because this is where I'm from. The best base of the whole world thing is also one of these associations that has highlighted this. I think you can tell from this shot why the Bay of Santander has such renown. This is actually in one of the beaches leading to the bay, which is La Playa de la Magdalena, just off the just off the Peninsula Magdalena and where the palace is. And the views are just stunning. On the other side, we have many other beaches, including El Sardinero Beach, which we have a tour of this actually in our channel. But, well, it's Santander is just a town that has a lot to offer and that a lot of people are not familiar with. We do have a small airport and we do have some connections mostly in Europe, but it's very much worth the visit. Just the Paseo Marítimo, the maritime walk, is about 5 kilometers, full of coastline, 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 and it will take you through some beautiful sights simply by just having a stroll. So, come to my town, it will not disappoint. And of course, one of the other reasons why Santander has become very famous for is because of our street art. We are the birth town of Okuda, which we actually had a tour of this recently, of the street art of Santander. We're going to include more street art content in the channel, so keep an eye out for those. Okuda San Miguel is one of the biggest names in street art internationally now in mural depiction, and we have many, many, of course, of his art, not just in Santander, but in the whole of Cantabria. So if you're part of the street art gang of lovers, we will see you in Santander. But now, unfortunately, and because I can talk about my hometown and Cantabria forever and ever and ever, but of course that's not the point of all of this, let me take you to our neighbors to the left, which are often just as forgotten as we are, which is the region of Asturias. Well, Asturias is again one of those green regions in Spain that are often forgotten, and one of the reasons for that is because, well, it's also quite a very sparsely populated region. I think in the whole of the region there is just about 1 million people in total and less. So it's really, really going downwards, and it's because life in Asturias hasn't always been prolific or wealthy. But it's very important for nature conservation. So again, if you're a nature lover, you need to come to Asturias. Well, I'm going to show you two very important spaces in Asturias that are actually protected by UNESCO, Somiedo and Las Ubiñas. In fact, what you have in front of you right now is part of Somiedo. This is Lago del Valle, which is, well, a forest, essentially, where we can only find a very specific type of oak, which is called quejigo. It's very important for the conservation of this specific tree. And, well, this was all created through glacial terrain, so it's an area that is full of lakes and lagoons and waterfalls. So honestly, it's very evocative. Just, be prepared for rough terrain and, of course, chilly weather, because it can get a little bit, tough in there. There is also a lot of osos pardos, a lot of our version of brown bears in this area, and over 120 types of birds. So, if you really enjoy this, come around. You will not, miss it. Of course, another thing that we see in here is a lot of traditional small villages and like pastoral type of communities, which are very much forgotten now. So if you want to engage with, like I said, the more rural side, go to Asturias. And this area that you see around here is Las Ubiñas, La Mesa. And, there is a lot of prehistoric and Roman heritage in here. Also a lot of caves, more related to the area of speleology and geology than anything else. And there is also landscapes in different altitudes. So, compared for very, very mountainous kind of ski-like resorts to also more like rolling hills and what have you not. It's honestly a very, very charming area that I just wish more people got to experience. And another thing that Asturias is very famous for is what we call arte pre-romanico asturiano, pre-Romanesque architecture and art in Asturias. In Asturias specifically, we get a lot of it in a very wonderful state of conservation. There are many, many, many sites that are actually protected by UNESCO. And the first one that you see right here is San Salvador de Valdedios, which is a little church from the 9th century. As you see, still complete, barely touched by time. Absolutely wonderful. The type of pre-Romanesque art that we have in Spain is very unique, like, well, pre-Romanesque almost everywhere. But the fact that this is the area of Spain where the Muslim influence hadn't gotten to it just yet, since we were part of the, let's say, area of the Reconquista, and where the big relaunch of the reconquest of Spain comes from, it is very important for those sort of early Christian kingdoms that will fight against the developed of Al-Andalus. So it's a very important part of the local history and culture. There is another more iconic, I guess famous place, which is Santa Maria del Naranco, and this actually was a palace from the early Middle Ages that then eventually got turned into a religious space. So as you can see, many of these places like this in the area of Asturias, and the best place to go to see them is Oviedo, which is the capital, and actually you will be able to drive to these sites in just a short while. But again, you often need to book ahead in advance because they are not easily accessible, and the conservation is important, so keep an eye out. Now let me take you to a place in Asturias that a lot of people seem to forget about, which is Avilés. Avilés is a relatively, or at least a smaller town. It has like a traditional city center, and the majority of the town itself is industrial background. There is a lot of industry actually in Asturias. For the longest time, the majority of people from Asturias work in mines. So that's the background of the area and the region. But in Avilés, we have the famous Centro Cultural Internacional Oscar Niemeyer, which is the cultural center for the cultural international exhibitions of Oscar Niemeyer, the very, very famous Brazilian architect, and actually is pretty much the most important of these characteristics that we have in Europe. There are very few constructions of Oscar Niemeyer in Europe, and the one in Avilés, as you can see, is quite flamboyant and flashy. So if you want to see something a bit different when the industrial and the new mix together, go to Avilés, because it's the only one of the architect in the whole of Spain. And like I said, very, very few like this in Europe. But something else that you should get involved when you come to visit Asturias is the many, 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 many festivities of the region. And perhaps one of the most famous is the Festival de la Sidra, the cider festival of Asturias. Asturias is well known for its cider production, which a lot of people aren't aware of. I think most people think of cider and they just think of the Basque Country and England. Well, let me tell you, here in the Celtic part of Spain, we also produce cider, and Asturias is definitely the hallmark of our cider production. In fact, the cider festival takes place every single year. It's one of the biggest events of the year, actually, in the middle of July, the second one, if I remember, in the town of Nava. And it is one of the most important cider festivities in the whole of Europe. And it's not just cider, by the way, there is also music and whatnot. So it's actually a very cool cultural thing that Asturian people are very proud of. So when you go to Asturias, even if you cannot make it to the festival, have some cider and let us know which one you like better, if the British one or ours, or if you are very well traveled, the cider from the north of France in areas such as Brittany or Normandy. As you see, all of these are Celtic connections, and that is why I'm very emphatic of our, background in terms of the Celtic fringe. Well, this is probably all we have time for Asturias, unfortunately, as much as it's tempting me, but I have something else to tempt you with. Galicia, which is my other home region. Part of my family came from Galicia. I spent many, many, many summers in a little village in the middle of nowhere. Well, not so much the middle of nowhere, but it's called Comboa, which is not far away from the area of Pontevedra. And my great-grandfather actually came from a small village called La Portela, nearby A Coruña. So Galicia for me is important because it's also part of my people. And one of my best memories of Galicia, and something that I love, is pulpo a la gallega, or polpo da feira, which is what you have right in front of you. Seafood in the north of Spain, I think it's probably obvious, but in case you didn't know, I'll remind you. Seafood in the north of Spain is what you need to eat, through and through. You must do it. And octopus and squid in the north of Spain is tremendous. This is a very traditional octopus dish. Is different parts of the octopus that have been cooked slowly, and the octopus is very, very tender, so it's not supposed to be chewy. It's very tender on a bed of slow cooked potatoes with a tiny bit of oil and paprika. It's delicious, and I have very, very, very famous memories of every summer going there and my great granddad buying it for me after a special day out. So come to Galicia after you've had some cider in Asturias and eat some good. Well, maybe you may recall that a few moments ago I mentioned how the Basque Country was a historical community. Well, it's the same with Galicia. Galicia is also a nationality and a historical identity that is special in Spain, and it's because the Kingdom of Galicia and in general Galician people have their own language, own background, etc. They were a different part of Spain, a bit secluded from the traditions of Castile, and that is still something that is very important for their background. So keep this in mind. In fact, people from Galicia have a very specific accent because Gallego is like I said, it's its own thing, and a lot of people in Galicia will only speak in Gallego, not necessarily in Spanish. So keep that in mind when you go to the region. Now, a reason why a lot of people come over to Galicia is something very important that I've kind of hinted already here and there, but this is el Festival Internacional do Mundo Celta. And this is the International Festival of the Celtic World in Ortigueira. It is essentially a free annual folk festival for all Celtic nations all across Europe. It's very much based around those cultural items that bound us together in terms of music, food, and culture. And music plays a huge role. Celtic music is a very important part of the north of Spain. It's part of the heritage of our folk music. You know, a lot of people associate Spain with flamenco and sevillanas. No, that is not the music I grew up with. That is not the music that identifies people like me from the north and from the sea. Pipes, and I'm talking like bagpipes, maybe not necessarily with the same timbre like you're expecting from the ones in Scotland, but bagpipes, a lot of wind instruments and drums are very much core to our music. So this is a big thing for us and something that actually attracts a lot of people in every single July, which is actually where it takes place. And there are some very big names that have come in here, not just from Spain like Carlos Núñez, but even the Chieftains, who are perhaps one of the most famous Celtic folk music band from Ireland. So as you can see, this is a big deal. Well, of course, one of the other reasons why people come to Galicia is because of Santiago de Compostela. We had started the Path of St. James in Navarra. Well, you need to finish it, and you come to Santiago to explore and to enjoy this pilgrimage. And not just that, to see the beautiful cathedral, which is, of course, a UNESCO heritage site and contains some of the best Romanesque in the whole country. So, of course, there is a lot of pilgrims that come in here. And of course, there is a lot of history in Santiago. Santiago has a very important cultural city center with a lot of beautiful, breathtaking architecture. So it's not just about this run of St. James and the pilgrimage, it's just the history of the city itself. Consider that this has been a bastion of Christendom pretty much for the last 1,000+ years. So it's a very important thing. And I say 1,000+ years because there is actually a lot more to the region of Galicia that a lot of people think about. Galicia actually has some pretty strong Roman heritage, even though I've been pushing for my Celtic background. We see this in another town, in the town of Lugo. I have a very, very dear friend of mine who's a wonderful tour guide. If you're ever in Lugo, you need to go and have a tour with Monica, who is an amazing tour guide and who will very much promote you to engage with the beautiful fortifications of the town of Lugo, which are from the 3rd century AD. It's actually, a very important fortress to the point that is twinned with the Great Wall of China, and this is once again UNESCO heritage. And there is an entire reenactment festival that takes place, by the way, at this moment in time, which not a lot of people are necessarily familiar with, but that definitely is worth the while, and it's called Ardelucus. We have a few of those all across Spain, so make sure that you engage with our festivals of whatever character. And since I have spoken a lot about our Celtic background and what have you not, let me actually take you to a Celtic heritage site, although we have many in the north of Spain, which is this one. So this is what remains of Santa Trega. This is what we call a castro. A castro is essentially a Celtic settlement. This one dates from the 1st century BC to the 1st century AD. And it's perhaps one of the ones of easier access because a lot more that is visible has been left. But a lot of the people, the traditional tribes from the north of Spain, lived in settlements like this, which often were later on taken over by the Romans and what have you not. So, as much as I have, picked Santa Trega, you will find castros in Asturias, in Cantabria, and Navarra and País Vasco. However, not all of them are as well preserved. In Cantabria, we have a few that are very important because we also have a conservation in there for the history of the Cantabrian Wars, which is again an annual festival that comes to highlight the arrival of the Romans to the region and the defense of our natural culture against them, which was actually a very important part of the epic early history of Spain. So, if you want to do a double bill with some ancient history, with Arte Lucus and then Santa Trega, you can enjoy that. And I have one final thing for you, which is perhaps something you would not expect, but very topical for this time of the year, which is right this. These are the Christmas lights of Vigo. Vigo is perhaps the other most common place where a lot of people come into the north of Spain by boat. There is a fair few cruise ships, growing number of cruise ships, which will stop at Bilbao and Vigo, and if not, at Coruña. Well, the town of Vigo, to be honest, is not a particularly beautiful town. Like, I'm not necessarily trying to diss Vigo. I've been to Vigo many times. But in terms of architecture, it's perhaps not as remarkable or as interesting as some other locations. However, very smartly, the town of Vigo, a few years ago, they decided to, kind of go big or go home with their Christmas displays. Christmas displays are an interesting thing in Spain, and traditionally they've been very much associated with the 12-night celebrations for three wise men or three kings. We have a lot of nativity scenes and things like that. But the Christmas light, shenanigans were normally quite traditional or perhaps a bit tame, unless you're in a big town like Madrid. So Vigo instead decided to make themselves out of the norm from what a lot of towns were doing and give themselves this new look. So actually a lot of crowds flock during the Christmas period to see the lights on Vigo because they really bring a different kind of charm and spectacle to the whole city that is very much worth your while. So, come for the octopus, stay for the lights, as I guess. But as you can see, there is a lot to the north of Spain, and this is barely what I can tell you in 45 minutes, guys. I'm sure you realize I can go into a lot of detail about a lot of these places, but hopefully what this has given you is a different view of what Spain can be about, which is something that sincerely in the north we desperately need. Tourism is very, very important, of course, all across Spain, but it often ends up very condensed in some very specific regions, which are suffering quite badly from mass tourism and often pushing the locals away from their homes and making touristic activities not as exciting or as memorable as you would hope for. The numbers of visitors that keep on going to the Alhambra and actually damaging our beautiful Islamic art down in the south, or people getting so crowded in Barcelona that can never see La Sagrada Familia, it's kind of getting a bit much. So don't force the locals out of their towns and don't go where everybody is so that you will not even be able to actually experience the vibe. Spain is a very large country. Consider that the UK fits twice in the whole of Spain. Come to the north just alone, to any of these places, to any of these cities, and you will be bewildered by the variety of cultures, the different types of flavors, of peoples, of personalities, and history that you will enjoy in the north. And I don't say that just as a proud northerner, I say that as someone who genuinely enjoys the off the beaten track trails. You will find far less people in the majority of these towns and locations. You will find genuine, engaging experiences which will be very memorable and that will feel very much authentic and hopefully will make your holiday something that you will remember forever. And on that note, that's the end of this talk for today. Like I said, maybe I'll go further in depth into all of these things at some other point. But for now, I will leave you with these recommendations that hopefully have sparked your imagination. So, thank you so much for listening. Hoping that you are having a very lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much for your support to all of our members and sponsors on PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. Please do check the links in the chat and in the description of the tour so that you can keep on supporting us, so that we can keep on doing what we do. And we're hoping that you're all having a really, really lovely rest of your day. Take care and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.